I'm delighted to introduce you to our high-level panel. He is Professor of Practice at Arizona State University and member of the Water Policy Group. Formerly, he served at UN Water and FAO. With us is Dr. Olcay Ünver. Mr. Ünver, greetings from Berlin. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, I can hear you, and greetings from a sunny Rome.
Ah, nice, wonderful. Thank you. Stay in line. And with us also the Strategic Program Director for Water, Food and Ecosystems Affiliation at the International Water Management Institute, Professor Stefan Uhlenbrock. Mr. Uhlenbrock, how is the connection in Colombo?
Hello, I hope your connection is good. We just have sunset. So my greetings from, it's a rainy season here. It's actually not so sunny in Colombo at the moment.
Well, maybe you switch on then the video so we can see the sunset also. Because we just saw a black image. Could you switch on the video so we're gonna see?
It's on, and I see myself in a small window next to you. I'm not sure what else I have to do. I think the camera host needs to put me on. The camera is okay.
The camera is switched on? Okay. Yeah. So we're gonna check that in a minute. With us also is the Director of Sustainability Methods at BASF and responsible for the sustainability methods of BASF worldwide with centers in the USA, in Brazil, and in Asia. With us is Peter Saling.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, wonderful. Thanks, Mr. Saling.
Thank you.
And we have with us also the head of section of the Competence Center Water, Wastewater, Waste Management, a lot of water at the GIZ. Thanks for being with us, Barbara Gerhager. Ms. Gerhager, can you hear me? Yes? Can you give us a little...
Thank you also, and welcome from Eschborn. I'm very happy to be with you.
Greetings to Eschborn. Thank you. And last but not least, we have the lead water specialist at the European Investment Bank since 2004. Harald Churchill is with us. Hello, Mr. Churchill.
Hello, good afternoon.
Mr. Churchill. Okay, so we have everybody on board. Yes, and now we have also the videos. Thanks, it's good to see you all. Greetings from Berlin. I'm gonna sit down now to start with our panel discussion. And of course, we would love to start with a little tour de table. So we are very much interested, of course, when we were just listening to the actions calls made by GRoW. What are your main takeaways from GRoW? So I would love to start with Dr. Olcay Ünver again, coming as a first panelist. Mr. Ünver.
Yes, can you hear me?
Wonderfully, yes.
Okay, wonderful. First of all, I've been following both the online material and the discussions, and I'm very much impressed. And again, as I finished yesterday in my keynote speech, I commend both the researchers and the German ministry for making this program a reality, because it's in support of what the international community is trying to accomplish, accelerating SDG 6 in particular and Sustainable Development Goals in general. And my take is that the work presented here actually supports substantively all of the 5 enablers of the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework. And since this is a starting round, I will just name them. Investment is indirectly supported by your work because, as Professor Mauser indicated a few minutes ago, investments and decisions regarding water are usually done in other sectors, and the impacts come from other sectors, but also incorrect investments can be made in other sectors. So your work is bound to contribute to making investments water-friendly, water-efficient, and productive. Data and information is another take that I was very impressed with, both at the level of sub-indicators for targets, but also establishing cross-linkages among the different targets of Sustainable Development Goals. And that is definitely in support of what the international community and particularly the UN system is trying to establish and promoting. And taking this to the field level is essential. And I think this is something that should be discussed at both at the policy level, but also at the cross-section of policy science and practice. Capacity building is already included as given, and I'm not going to relate to that. Governance is a key issue when it comes to accelerating Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly the water goal number 6. And the work under the GRoW initiative is impressive in multiple ways, because it looks at not only the governance structures for the sake of governance, but it also looks at the evidence base that is needed for the policymakers to adjust themselves and to move towards the 21st century governance that can make use of the 21st century technology and innovation. So I'll stop here at this round.
Thank you so much, Mr. Unver. Thank you. Greetings to Rome. Of course, we'll come back to you in a second. Mr. Uhlenbroek, what are your main takeaways from GRoW and, of course, from following around the conference in the past 48 hours?
Thanks, Kati. Well, I have a bit of biased view, of course. As you know, I've been involved in the so-called Lenkungskreis steering committee over the last 3-4 years. So I had the chance to follow the developments, and they were exciting. You know, really congratulations to all the 12 programs and their researchers and professionals who contributed to this. I think in the introduction presentation, we said there's some 300 plus professionals, researchers involved in this program, and you can really see that's paying off. You know, it is impressive what has been achieved in many ways. But I'm not only here to praise the BMBF with its very wise investment, which I really believe it is one. You ask for the key takeaways, and I think what I found impressive is this kind of following the global discourse, following the global debate, and translating that into the research program. So this kind of global local linkages I found very strong. I know we saw that just today again from the global policy when it comes to energy generation, looking at how water actually plays a controlling role there. We saw that in the governance presentations where the SDGs, the global processes were very much linked to local decision making, to supporting operators, water managers at different scales with the knowledge. So I found that linkage is quite well done. Also with all the footprint analysis that we had the chance to listen to over the last 48 hours. I think this is cutting edge science, but not only that, which is hard enough, but it's also a real attempt to trying to translate that. And if I may, one more point, and I felt that the 3 action items that Professor Mauser just summarized with a strong push or leverage for the digitalization, I found that well coined, as well as the other ones related to teleconnections and good governance. So I think all these points really show a serious attempt of translating not all the details of the science, but really translating science into the policy arena. These are my main takeaways. Thanks.
Thank you. And Peter Sarling, what are your main takeaways doing and following this Tour de Table, also, of course, from your perspective?
Yes, thank you. So from my perspective, for sure, it's also an industry perspective, because we as BASF, we're using a lot of water and we need the water. We see it more and more. And we have also situations where we see we do not have enough or accurate water qualities available. So we started years ago with a water stewardship program, and we have also our sites on risk of water in our focus, and we have a program to reduce the risk significantly. And therefore, it's needed to identify where are the risks, to identify also where are water risks linked with products, and that's really a challenge. And so I really support that that point to have more transparency in there and to have also a digitalization linked with that, because water is a regional or it contains an important regional aspect, and we should focus on that. We should have good information that we can really make good decisions afterwards, and that's an industry really relevant. It needs to be made transparent also for the consumers, for the users of the products. And on the other side, we also should identify where water is probably not the biggest issue, because we will see some aspects, some trade-offs, and that's also something we have to handle. And that is possible with a good data quality, with meaningful information and data. And so I was also involved in the development of the water footprint standard ISO 14046, and it's now I'm ISO chair for this standard. And so we see a lot of uses of these standards, and will be much more in the future. So I think it's needed to have a standardized process to that, to come to good conclusions and to have meaningful data behind it that are available for a lot of people. And that is a regionalized product-related data set that is needed. And thanks for the work for that, because I think water is one of our most important resources, also linked with other aspects, as Professor Malta mentioned, like diversity or others. And we should also think about to have a panel comparable to the IPCC or so to focus more on the water topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salink. And of course, coming now to Barbara Gerhager, and greetings to Eschborn.
So, thank you very much. Happy to be with you. And first of all, I want to congratulate to this focused recommendation. This paper should be an important building block to highlight the importance of water to the leaders of business and policy. And this is even more vital now during the COVID pandemic. Coming from GIZ and the Development Corporation, I want to emphasize that for us, a big takeaway was the connection to GrowNet. So we learned, for example, from Viva and Welle, different digital solutions, which are for us future-oriented in our work with our partner countries. Or InnoCut and GRoW and Trust, they work directly with our partners in the country, which was an added value for us. It is important to learn what is possible. And furthermore, it is also necessary for development to challenge each other and exchange a different perspective, as we did in the governance group. So nevertheless, a lot of stakeholders, as you saw during implementation, which I could follow in the steering group, often makes development complex and mostly better, but more sustainable. And I think you can be very, very proud of what you reached, what good results you reached in this short period of time. Therefore, I like to encourage you to keep up with the networking, as I believe we will need a fast-growing water community and even non-water community for the local to global understanding of water resources and definitely action taking. And there, for me, I have a wish as a big takeaway. I wish that the huge GRoW network of excellent scientists and BMBF takes up the chance to spread the recommendation and the further development. And I believe that the BMBF shall facilitate a platform for the global leaders in policy and business, where the scientists can spread the recommendation on a really high level. For me, these recommendations are kind of a rough diamond, which shall be worked on in future. And this is what I would wish, and this is what I take away, that this is not finalized here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gerhager. And last but not least in our round is also Harald Churchill. Your takeaway, your main takeaways from the GRoW call to action, please.
Good afternoon. Again, the last but not least with me. I'd like to always start with a very short clarification. The European Investment Bank is the largest lender to the water sector in the world, and we lend about 2.5 billion euros every year, supporting projects in excess of like 5 billion euros per year, just in the water sector, water and wastewater sector. And I think my main takeaway when I look what's been produced here and where science stands is how large the gap between what's been happening when we take investment decisions that to some extent will form the reality of millions of people for a very long period. Yeah, and here on the other hand, to see what is already technically possible and feasible, and it's a bit shocking. Yeah, because I could list, without thinking a lot about it, about so many projects where large dam projects that are being based just on interpolated data that has been sometimes read or sometimes didn't read. Flow meters by the village chief's wife or husband, and this is something that really concerns me to see, that the reality, and it's been mentioned here before on the path to SDG 6, how I consider myself on the implementation level, and not on the governance and high level policy decision making, but to see how the decision making progress is still in the 70s or in the 80s. It's not even in the 2000s. And on the other hand, to see what is possible is quite something, like I said, mind-boggling or boggling, sorry. So my question here is rather, how can methods that would certainly improve not just the project, but also obviously benefit the people for whom we finance projects, how can this knowledge be transferred to the regions where they're most needed? Because it is certainly not Europe, where I know that, because we also work in Europe, that there's often decisions taking based on data or so that is not really understandable. But nonetheless, where the real problems is in sub-Saharan Africa and in the Middle East and in many other regions, of course. So that is my main takeaway from this conference.
Thank you, Mr. Schölzel.
Did anybody hear me?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Mr. Ullenbrook, this question, the last question by Mr. Schölzel, also is a direct question maybe to you, questioning, of course, how can these methods presented by the GRoW projects help actually transfer to a local level?
What was the question to me?
How the methods presented by, is your image gone again? Now you're here again. Okay. Maybe if you hear me, maybe we go on. Otherwise, we come back to you and we check on the connection. Coming back to Mr. Unver, you were just mentioning also yesterday, of course, we should be bold again. And from science-based knowledge to effective policies and strategies, we have only 10 years to go. The Agenda 2030 is only 10 years away. So you were already mentioning some priorities, but I would rather ask you again how to get the speed for SDG 6 from your perspective, and what examples of actions do you have concretely in mind that actually drives us forward?
Yes, there are actually two tracks. One is the government track, to which the United Nations system is more influential and directly in touch with. And here, the assistance, support that can come from the international community in unison, which is that international community providing policy assistance, but also scientifically supported recommendations and actually upscalable projects that can be taken to governments will be very useful. And again, from the implementation of and monitoring of the projects that have been carried out together with public and private partners can play a role here. It's just that the partnership opportunities for bridging science policy, the corporate world and the civil society are not yet that strong, and those need to be strengthened in the very near future. And again, coming back to the global acceleration framework of UN Water, I am very strongly suggesting that the principal investigators and partners of the GrowNet projects record them in the action space and help them be understood by the stakeholders in countries, because you need to reach out to the countries. That is one. The other track is the business track, which is extremely important for two reasons. One is that there is a lot of potential to save water in the business track. And somebody yesterday was referring to the fact that procurement managers were controlling more virtual water than actual production managers. So we are looking at not only the production, but the supply chain. And here, the work on water footprints is commendable, but it is yet to be extensively adopted by the business community and implemented in a transparent manner, particularly in standardized disclosures that will look at the whole supply chain and the value chain, and not one particular point in this chain that might be the production plant of a business, which could be extremely efficient, and then the same business could be causing a lot of wastage in terms of water use through its supply chains, and that needs to be standardized, and that also needs a lot of support from the governments, the donor community, and the organizations of the corporate world. One last thing is the role of investors. We had Harald from the European Investment Bank, but investors such as big insurance funds, they control huge amounts of money, and they can play a big role in making the business community, the corporate world, adapt water efficient technologies, practices, and have a direct influence on their supply chains through their business influences.
Unver. Thanks, Mr. Unver. Talking about business, that brings us, of course, to the private sector and, of course, straight to BASF. So, Mr. Saling, I'm starting now with you, talking about the private sector and the involvement of the private sector. So how would you say, how is the private sector currently, how is it involved, and how should science approach, of course, more and more the private sector? For example, on the World Economic Forum, some stakeholders, what do you expect from your side, from science?
Yeah, what I mentioned before is good science means also that we can measure the effects of water, so in different directions for sure, not only water scarcity, but also different types of water pollutions. So there need to be established harmonized, meaningful methods that really show the effects in the environment, and that can be also adopted by industries. And so we need the same level playing field for all industries so that we really compare products. As we go more and more in the carbon footprint today, we going closer to that. That is also needed for the water footprints, because if you generate data that are not comparable, then at the end the acceptance will drop down, and everyone will do its own solution, and that's definitely not a good way to do that. So it needs to have a harmonized way that is supported by findings of the academia, and also ending in tools and applications that easily can be used to highlight also water footprints, to highlight also probably water stress activities in different regions, and to give also us in the marketing and development of products the support that this goes in the right direction concerning water, because we definitely also adopt the SDGs, and that is also something where industry wants to move on, but it needs to be in a harmonized and standardized way, and that's where academia with science can really support us on this journey, I must say.
And a little add-on question to that, being a little bit more precisely, what are you playing back now to, or into your company, into BASF from the GRoW calls to action, of course, from the GRoW results?
Yeah, so that there are really good findings on this way, how to move that on. So the call for action, I think, is a really good movement to show where improvements are needed and what needs to be established. For instance, transparency, but also big data. We're talking a lot of big data in industry. How can we connect them? How can we connect them along the whole supply chain? Because that is really key aspect in there, to follow the whole water flows in the supply chain. And that is a take-home message for me, that there was a really good step in this direction done. I don't think that's finished so far. Therefore, we need more tools and ways how to implement that. But I think on this way, harmonization, digitalization, and also transparent assessment of water impacts, that is a clear direction that helps us in industry to improve also our situation in concerning of water, and to go closer to the SDG to reach the goals.
Thank you, Mrs. Ahling. And of course, the keywords digitalization and networks brings me to Ms. Gerhage. You were mentioning in your table round, a platform is needed for scientists and for leaders. So maybe you can go into that a little bit more detail. How can we actually further expand the network of scientists, of private sector, and of the policy makers from your perspective? What is your wish? And of course, do you have any examples that are already showing how to do it?
Thank you very much. I think Peter Salling also mentioned it. It's a bit time like what the climate expert did, kind of getting a network together and make a point on how important is water for the future. And I think even so, as we also saw during the implementation time, that incentives sometimes on the scientists are on a different page. I think first of all, it was a perfect, wonderful network, great experts, and I think it's really the time to, as I said, these recommendations to work further on it. Kind of creating a platform. This is what I think BMBF, due to their political arena, can use to get the connection and get the doors open to the political decision takers, that our points or the points of the network are brought forward. And I think it's really time to kind of work on it. And especially if you look at the COVID pandemic, it's actually a good starting point now, because water is a very crucial part of the solution when we look at COVID and the recovery. I think this is very much needed, and then also from science, digitalization is a key. I mean, we heard it several times yesterday and today that data on the local level is very difficult to get. So it's good to kind of get them, analyze them, and also then interconnect, actually use digital solutions where you connect local data with the global data. And this is, I think, very important. And also what we heard for transparent reason to kind of open up the different users to kind of share data for the good of a kind of sustainable water management use worldwide. I mean, this sounds now a bit kind of overall, but at least we need processes which go from local to global and backwards. And this we need to kind of work on. Yes, and also then for what we had, I think yesterday or today, no, I think it was yesterday, when they said we have probably local water solutions that a company moves on, that's good for the local water management, but it's not for the economy. So I think it's good to kind of build up a network and find common solution, which kind of also take into account social and economical benefits, which also are very much needed for the countries. Thank you.
Thank you. You were also pointing out, of course, the improvement of the governance. So improving governance is also one central aspect of the GIZ consulting process, which requires, of course, knowing which decision tool exists. So the question goes into a communication question. How can the GRoW tools further be communicated from your side on what is your wish to that?
Yes. So as I did it during the time when I was on the steering board, I definitely will continue to build the networks and connect people. And I, from my side, I also will try to kind of bring the GRoW network closer to last year. The next year there should be a water forum to see if they can be a point there. And also I would wish that we discussed in the steering committee really ways forward where we can use it and where can we work together to better, to get a step ahead. I mean, as we are also GIZ, we can try to place it, but we are also not a policy maker as such. Yeah. So what I can do is kind of facilitate the connection and facilitate that the message is taken ahead.
Facilitation is a good keyword. Coming now to Mr. Uhlenbrook. I think we got you back in the connection. Yes. We were talking a lot about the interlinkages of the SDGs, of course. And the question goes into the direction of where do you see the biggest challenges, of course, in linking from one side the local and the global levels in water management within the next 10 years, but also, of course, within the SDGs. So how or where do you see the challenges between or within the SDG linkages? I hope you understood my whole question, I guess.
Thanks.
Unfortunately, I don't have an audio, so maybe. Am I the only one that doesn't hear? No? Okay. I was just wondering. Yes, I can't hear you, unfortunately, Stefan, but maybe is there an audio switch on button again?
Of course, I try.
Here you are. Wonderful. Okay, quick, before the connection goes and fade away. We were talking about the SDG interlinkages. I hope you got my question, right?
I know. I got the question and had an excellent answer, but now I forgot the answer. No. Now, seriously, I think it is really a good question. I've been following the Sdg monitoring process over the last years quite closely. And I think we have a fantastic opportunity with this Sdg framework and also with a performance management system with indicators, really trying to monitor continuously our progress, which is very good. On the other hand, the UN and all the member states were very focused on a couple of globally agreed indicators. And I think, and then you have a value for the integrated water resources management status per country. But I think the GRoW type of research shows us the complexity. It really demonstrates us how much more there is to it. You know, it's much more than a number per country. It demonstrates how many different aspects we have to integrate it as water resources management, how different aspects we have when it comes to the efficiency in water use. So I think it is extremely valuable because research like the GRoW really demonstrated the interlinkages and that and a single indicator cannot tell the whole story. And I think that is very, very successful. And I hope you could hear my last minute. I'm
completely.
not sure.
Yes. I have an add-on question on that because we are living in times of a global pandemic. So do you think the coronavirus brings more difficulties into the interlinkages of the SDGs? And if so, how?
Well, this sad story showed many things, and also showed the vulnerability of society. You know, one of these kind of shocking facts was, globally we have some 10% of the world population that is hungry every day, and 690 million, and there's 800 or so million who earn less than $1.9 a day. And due to COVID-19 and the economic downturn, we observe that the poverty rate is escalating. Unfortunately, maybe there's another 150 million people pushed into poverty. That means many tens of more million people will get hungry. So it really demonstrates the vulnerability and a very sad part of that. On the other hand, this Build Back Better opportunity is there. We have now the opportunity to maybe learn from the mistakes of the past and think about new ways how we kind of rebuild this society, new ways of how we manage water supply and wastewater treatment, maybe with decentralized solutions, with maybe low cost and other ways to achieve a standard that at least serves more members of society. So there are opportunity sites as well. Also, the huge stimulus packages that have been issued by a number of countries, including the European Union and the US, etc. We talked about trillions. And to use this wisely, this money, to create jobs and build back this society, the economy, but on the other hand, learn from the mistakes and do it in a more green and a more sustainable way. I believe there's a lot of opportunities, in particular also when it comes to water services.
Thank you, Mr. Unver. When we're listening to Mr. Uhlenbrock, and of course this optimistic view on looking on the opportunities, you were also pointing out that of course the governance structures need to be changed, and that the governance the governance structures needed to be changed. And of course, this is in times of a pandemic an interesting question. Do you think it's rather easy to follow these calls for action, or do you think it's rather difficult in times of the 2020 new normal?
It's easy and it's difficult. It's difficult because a lot of particularly the political decision makers, tend to look at the next few years at most. And when they do that, they focus on the emergent issues, such as, immediately responding to the direct impacts of COVID. So this is why it's difficult. But it's easy at the same time because a lot of the decision makers have a broader circle of advisors and others that have a longer term view. And the pandemic proved two things. One is that we are very vulnerable, and we may not have realized that until we get hit. So the pandemic hit us, and we can be hit by something else the next time, and then we may not be able to respond to that properly. And the climate change is an excellent example to that. So building back better involves looking at not only building back from where the pandemic impacted, but also building back what we were trying to build and we couldn't. Now we can do it better, taking into account all these vulnerabilities, the risks involved, and the
Yes.
proper safety nets for those people that are becoming poorer and poorer as a result of these vulnerabilities. So I am cautiously optimistic, and this is definitely what the United Nations system is trying to promote through the acceleration efforts and by promoting building back better globally.
Thank you, Mr. Unver. Mr. Churchill, I didn't forget you, of course. You weren't part of the GRoW process. So again, from your perspective, where do you see the concrete pitfalls, but also where do you need another structure for better implementation from your perspective?
Can you hear me? Because I have really difficulties to hear your question properly. Do you mind
I repeat it, yeah,
saying
of
it
course.
again?
Yes, Mr. Churchill. I was just mentioning that, of course, again, we're very interested into hearing more about your perspective onto your pitfalls. What do you see? Where do you see the pitfalls and the challenges concerning the GRoW call to action? But also, of course, where do you wish a better structure for a better implementation coming from GRoW?
Yeah, well, I'm still not sure if well, I don't think I've heard everything you asked, but I have an idea. It's again, I mean, the problem is from my side, yeah, where we, for instance, obviously all our projects are now related to indicators and other indicators, and we report figures that then I presume get aggregated at some level and then report on progress of the SDGs. But I think if I'm honest, and if we're all honest, to really wild guessing figures we communicate, because it is incredibly difficult to measure whether people do have access to sanitation or do have access to a safe water supply, starting from very hands-on problems. Yeah, well, you've got to first understand how many people do live where, and I'm talking again sub-Saharan Africa. Obviously, I'm not talking Europe. But also, of course, how many people do you reach and how do you verify the results of this? And I think, well, digitization could play, of course, a role, because obviously most of these people have cell phones everywhere. That's indeed the case. Yeah, and there could be methods to use data to improve at least this level of identifying or improving our statistics. I think somebody mentioned big data. We are, I think, in I can't really think of one project, yeah, where we could pretend to have used big data. We make lots of decisions under the greatest uncertainty, and I'm not saying this is okay, but there's obviously the difficult decision to, well, have to do something about a certain problem and take a decision even in the absence of data. So to think now about big data is really so far away from the implementation reality that I've seen over the last 3 decades. That again, my question and my concern is how these things, when will they find their way into the reality of people who work in implementation? Yeah. When will be the first wave of engineers and hydrologists and sociologists that take this kind of knowledge with them when they go out in the field and work on projects.
Thank you, Mr. Schell.
I think I'll stop here.
Yes, thank you. I'm coming back to you in a second. I just have a quick look around if there's any question from the audience here. Otherwise, the live stream audience, you're more than welcome to actually send me your questions. The chat is, of course, still open for you. Mr. Schell, I just have an add-on question to you, of course, because how can a financial institution like the European Investment Bank contribute, in fact, to foster a transparent and evidence-based water governance from your perspective?
Oh, we do, and we try to do that all the time. Well, a colleague once coined it, we do regulation by project. We include financing conditions that relate to tariff, that relate to governance, related issue that relate to corruption, that relate to all kinds of things. But I mean, many organizations, not least GIZ, and in particular, or KfW, they spend a good deal of effort on trying to, or on improving, not trying to, but on improving governance. For us as a financing institution, I think it's honest to admit it's also a bit difficult, because in the end, this is exactly what we are. We are a financing institution. We are not a development bank, we are an investment bank, and well, we want to invest in projects. So we try to, within the framework we have, we try to improve the situation, but in the end, we also want to make a loan. And I don't think that other financing institutions are very much very different from that approach.
At that point, Mr. Schulze, coming back now, of course, talking about and discussing sustainability in water management concepts. We already discussed that in global supply chains. So Mr. Saling, of course, coming from the BASF and being aware of the current discussions concerning the Lieferkettengesetz, where on the journey for a supply chain management journey is BASF currently, and where do you see still your homework to do?
Yeah, so we are on the track for a longer time. So we are in close contact with a lot of our suppliers, and we also generated programs that we want to focus on our suppliers. You might know that there's an organization, TFS, Together for Sustainability of the Chemical Industry, where we have our ratings for suppliers, and we have also audits, and where we want to see improvements. And so I think that's a good movement we have done together with other chemical organizations or businesses, where we want to see that there is an improvement. Water is always a topic there, because we see from which regions, which countries we purchase products. And so that's also where we focus on with water management programs together with our suppliers. And in this context, for sure, also social aspects are quite relevant. I think in the Lieferkettengesetz, we will see that more and more. So for us, it's a normal way since a longer time to do that. The challenging point is to cover a meaningful number of our suppliers. So we covered with the TFS roughly 15,000 suppliers. That's only a minor piece of our suppliers. So we have more than 100,000. So that's definitely a challenge. But we want to ensure that our purchased materials are really produced in a good situation, in a good surrounding, and because also our customers are asking for that. And so the way along the whole supply chain to prove that and to have good information along that is really key. And we are going in the region, we really generate data, we discuss that, we have audits there to generate the data to be sure that this is an accurate data set that we have, and also to identify where we can have improvement potential. So it's a long journey again, but we are still since some years on this journey, and we think it's important. If we really need a law, that can be discussed. So the question should be what is the achievement we want to have there. And for us, it's clear to have a sustainable supply chain and including all our suppliers. And that is a key challenge also for the future.
But a concrete add-on question, do you mainly support the Lieferkettengesetz from your perspective, or would you rather see challenges in implementing it?
The idea is definitely what we support, but we see in the implementation a lot of challenges. And that's also, again, we are operating worldwide, so we should see what other regions are doing. And so we need to be competitive to other regions, and that's also needed in this kind of law. So we think it's easier to have a voluntarily approach to that. And so that is the way that we want to go. So we are a little bit reluctant on this kind of regulation, because if the administration efforts are too high around that, then probably we lose a lot of time and money just to fulfill that and not to improve the situation. So that must be considered when this kind of law will be launched.
Thanks, Mr. Saling. Of course, talking about the different life realities on the local level, also about digitalization and teleconnections. Ms. Gerhager, I come back to you regarding these topics, because of course with your partners on the ground, there is the question, where do we still need to learn crucial aspects in supporting your GIZ partners? What is mostly needed from your side when you listen to the discussion so far?
Thank you very much. So I think data is always a big thing, but I want to look at it also at a different side. I think we should not underestimate, okay, our partners definitely need competence development, but on the other hand, especially looking into Africa, we have in Rwanda and South Africa growing digital hubs. So I think it's also important from our side to be aware what's the cutting edge of digitalization and what can be done. So I think it's a twofold approach coming to each other, and probably also a South-North learning at a certain point. So I think it's not just like they are not able to work and to use the tools we managed. It's also that they are very innovative in using them. Like in Morocco, we had hackathons to kind of come over solutions of water resource management in certain areas there. So I think they're open to innovation. So for us, as GIZ, it's important also to kind of supporting them in a kind of a leapfrogging, to start into another level of digitalization or using of digitalization when we talk about data generation. So definitely we will need it for decision making on a local level. We will need it for, as I said, for data using or teleconnection, how you call it. I think this is something we definitely have to work on, and there is a close interface with governance, as the transparency. And there, I think in future, it is important to kind of capacitize different stakeholders and also go together with them along in building the trust to use this data. I think this is one of the very crucial point in future, that there is a trust building in the system, in the data use. And this is one of the main focuses we will look at. On the other hand, what we said, the supply chain, this is something where we also have a big project in what we call water stewardship. And I think we have done a lot and reached a lot and also shown a lot that, especially in Africa, when we want to build up there 11 industrial centers, that it is really needed to look at it and see how water is used. Did we look at the resources? How many resources are available to build up these industrial parks in a sustainable manner, and how water is managed during production and how wastewater is managed? So I think there is a big field of what we want to support and where we definitely need also science to improve it and to make it better. And these are fields of implementation. I think there is capacity development, but I also think we should not underestimate how much capacity and willing for innovative approaches are already there out in the region, especially if we look at Africa.
Thank you, Ms. Gerhage. And coming to our last question, coming from you, ladies and gentlemen, from the live stream. So thanks for your question to Mr. Churchill. Could, for instance, public-private partnerships be a catalyzer, for development and also, of course, for improvement? So what is your take on public-private partnerships as it's mainly being done, of course, in the exploitation strategy of some of the projects presented here within GRoW? Mr. Churchill. You have to switch on the microphone again, otherwise
Well,
here you are.
I'm tempted to I'm tempted to give a cynical response, but I'm not. We also work on lots of PPPs, and unless you have a reliable and transparent governance structure already, there is no point in doing PPPs in an environment where decisions are not being taken well on facts or on evidence, but influenced by other things. I don't think that there's always this notion that not management, but water supply services or wastewater services can be improved by the private sector. And I think they do, but that they come at a cost, and they come at a high regulatory cost. And if these regulatory bodies are not in place, PPPs, in my experience, come at a very high cost and very few benefits to most countries.
Thank you, Mr. Schulze. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to Barbara Gerhage. Greetings to Eschborn. Thanks to Peter Saling. Professor Uhlenbroek. I think, yes, he's already gone. Thanks. And also to Dr. Olcay Ünver. Greetings from wherever you are. Thanks for joining us today and for discussing. Thanks for your answers and, of course, for your concrete calls for action.